1. Wittenoom, Western Australia, the silent killer. Wittenoom's story is a tragedy of industry. Established in the 1940s, this remote Pilbara town flourished around the promise of blue asbestos mining, a material once valued for its fire resistance. It was a thriving, bustling community, a quintessential company town complete with houses, a school, and a cinema, all built on a bedrock of deadly, blue-grey dust. Over 20,000 people lived and worked here, breathing in the very air that sealed their fate. Wittenoom is not haunted by the traditional ghost but by a profound, pervasive, and terrifying environmental evil. The true horror began after the government shut down the mine in 1966 due to overwhelming evidence of the asbestos's toxicity. The town was officially degazetted, power cut, and buildings demolished in the decades that followed, but the invisible, microscopic fibers of blue asbestos, or crucidolite, remain. Wittenoom is now the largest contaminated site in the Southern Hemisphere. The haunting is the knowledge of the thousands of former residents, miners, and even short-term visitors who have succumbed or will succumb to mesothelioma, asbestosis, and lung cancer, diseases with a latency period of decades. The real incident is the inevitable death sentence carried by the very dust. Visitors brave or foolish enough to ignore the omnipresent warning signs report an unnerving, palpable silence, a town wiped clean not by time, but by a plague. They speak of a creeping dread, the feeling of an unseen presence entering their lungs with every breath, a sensation far more terrifying than any phantom, the ghost of a silent, fatal illness, patiently waiting to claim its next victim. Wittenoom is a warning carved into the earth, where the very landscape breathes death. 2. Cook, South Australia, the perpetual watcher. Deep in the heart of the Nullarbor Plain, the railway town of Cook was established in 1917, purely as a vital staging post for the Trans-Australian Railway. Named after Prime Minister Joseph Cook, it was a sudden pocket of life in a vast, arid nothingness, complete with a hospital, school, pool, and a staff of around 50 maintaining the tracks. It was a hub of human ingenuity against the merciless isolation of the Outback. As diesel replaced steam engines and technology reduced the need for manpower, Cook with it, becoming a literal one-horse town, or rather, a one-person town, sometimes boasting a population of 4. The isolation that once made it important now makes it terrifying. The few remaining, lonely buildings, the diesel shed, the occasional house, are dwarfed by the endless, flat horizon. The real haunting here is one of utter solitude and the constant feeling of being watched. It said the spirits of past railway workers, unable to detach from their monumental, endless task, still maintain their invisible shifts. Drivers and maintenance crews passing through the dead of night have reported seeing flickering lights in the abandoned hospital windows when no one is there, only to have the light vanish the moment they look directly. Others speak of the faint, rhythmic clang of a hammer against steel from the abandoned workshops, a phantom sound carrying on the dry wind. The most chilling encounter is said to happen at the old pool, dry and cracked, where a sudden drop in temperature and a whispered, mournful sigh suggest the spirit is mourning the life, and the water, that evaporated from Cook, forever watching the rails they can no longer maintain. 3. Innamincka, South Australia, the pioneer's last breath. Innamincka, situated on the Cooper Creek, is intrinsically linked to one of the most tragic and famous events in Australian exploration. Long a gathering place for the Yendrawanda people, it was established by Europeans as Innamincka Station in 1872. Before that, in 1861, it became the final resting place for explorers Robert O'Hara Burke and William John Wills of the ill-fated Burke and Wills expedition. A police post, a store, and an inland mission hospital followed. It was a rugged, remote outpost that saw drovers, pioneering families, and the constant struggle against drought and unforgiving landscape before it was finally abandoned in 1952. The pervasive terror of Innamincka lies in the specters of failure, starvation, and desperation. The area is saturated with the dark energy of Burke and Will's demise, who died within miles of each other, having failed to correctly find the supplies cached for them. The most famous real haunted incident involves the Dig Tree and Gray's Tree. Gray's Tree, where expedition member Charles Gray was initially buried, is said to be a hub of distress. Visitors have reported unexplained illnesses, sudden feelings of intense hunger, and a heavy, suffocating atmosphere near the site. The ghosts of Burke and Wills themselves are most often heard, rather than seen. There are persistent accounts from campers and travelers near the Creek of Faint, desperate cries for help carried on the wind, particularly at dusk, which sound impossibly close yet vanish when tracked down. Some claim to see the shimmering outline of a man in ragged clothes on horseback, silently observing the modern world before fading back into the scrub, a pioneer trapped in the eternal, hopeless loop of his fatal journey. Innamincka is where the ghosts of Australia's pioneering ambition linger, forever reliving their final, fatal thirst. 4. Tambaroora, New South Wales, the Chinese gold miner's curse. Located near the now famous Hill End, Tambaroora was one of the earliest and most populous gold mining towns in the Turan district, booming from 1851. Its name, an Aboriginal word for sweet grass, belied the chaos that followed. It was a wild town of canvas tents and shanties, attracting a huge population, including a significant Chinese community who worked the tailings. By 1855, Tambaroora was the most populated in the district. Lawlessness was rife, with robberies and violence marking the early rush until the focus shifted to the richer quartz reefs at nearby Hill End, leading to its slow, inevitable decline. Tambaroura's gold rush history is steeped in the injustice and violence experienced by its large Chinese population. Despite their number, they often face discrimination and prejudice. The most prevalent ghost lore concerns the Chinese burial ground and the remnants of the Chinese temple on Red Hill. The real haunted incidents revolve around feelings of oppression and a sense of great, lingering sorrow. Visitors wandering the overgrown site have reported sudden, sharp pinpricks of pain and an inexplicable urge to turn and run. The most chilling accounts involve the cemetery, where many of the Chinese miners were laid to rest. People claim to hear faint, rapid conversations in an unfamiliar language, likely Cantonese or Hakka, near the burial ground after sundown, which abruptly ceases if anyone approaches too closely. The spirit most often mentioned is that of Nu Chip, the last old-time Chinese resident who died in 1937. His solitary grave is said to be a hotspot, where the air is unnaturally heavy, suggesting the loneliness of a man who watched his entire community vanish and is now bound to the dust of their forgotten gold. The ghost of Tambaroora is not a single figure, but the collective sorrow of a displaced community, forever guarding the gold that cost them everything. 5. Casilis, Victoria, the Crying Shaft and Vanishing People. Nestled in the high country of East Gippsland, Victoria, Casilis began as a classic gold mining township in the 1870s, focused around the King Cassilis mine. It was a tough, isolated existence, but for a time, it provided a living for those hardy enough to face the harsh climate and rugged terrain. The town once boasted a hotel, a school, and numerous stores, all dependent on the gold pulled from the earth. Like so many gold towns, the decline was rapid, and by the 1920s, it was largely abandoned, leaving behind scattered ruins and the gaping mouths of mine shafts. The terrifying lore of Casilis is closely tied to its most dangerous feature, the deep, unguarded mine shafts. The haunting is a blend of the supernatural and the real, brutal dangers of the old goldfields. One persistent legend involves the sound of a woman weeping near the deepest shaft. The story goes that a young woman, heartbroken over the death of her minor fiancé, either fell or threw herself into the shaft. Passers-by late at night have claimed to hear a sound like a woman's soft, continuous sobbing emanating from the earth, leading searchers to the precipice of a silent, black hole. The real encounter in Casilis often involves disorientation and the terrifying feeling of being lured into the abyss. There are chilling accounts of people on hiking trails suddenly feeling compelled to step off the path, only to realize they were walking toward an old, hidden mineshaft entrance. The ghost is said to be the vengeful or lonely spirit of the woman, now a phantom siren attempting to draw others into her permanent, cold darkness. Casilis is a place of sharp drops and whispered sadness, where the very earth seems to be crying out in warning. 6. Whroo, Victoria, the Cemetery of Whispers. Whroo, located in northern Victoria, had a dramatic start when gold was discovered in 1854. Named possibly after the date of a battle in the Crimean War, it quickly became a bustling settlement. The Balaclava Hill mine was hugely profitable for a time, attracting thousands of miners, including one of the investors whose fortune helped finance Melbourne's famous Menzies Hotel. Whroo was a classic boom and bust town. Its population plummeted almost as fast as it grew, and though mining sputtered on for decades, the town was eventually deserted, leaving behind the massive open-cut mine. The pervasive creepiness of Whroo centers not on its mine, but on its historic cemetery, where around 400 people are believed to be buried, many in unmarked graves. Life in Whroo was brutal, and the tombstones that remain tell stark tales of harsh conditions and short lives. Visitors consistently report that the cemetery is saturated with an unnerving, palpable sense of dread. The real encounter is a profound and unshakable feeling of being unwelcome, of traversing ground that actively rejects the living. People have claimed to experience sudden, intense nausea and dizzy spells the moment they cross the cemetery boundary. More chillingly, there are accounts of whispering voices and faint, desperate coughs that seem to come from beneath the ground, echoing the suffering of those who died from accidents, illness, or simply the grueling toil of the goldfields. Locals have warned of the shadow of a small boy seen darting between the older, dilapidated headstones, sometimes heard to whimper, as if permanently lost from the community that has long since faded to dust. Whroo is a place where the graves refuse to grant eternal rest, leaving the atmosphere thick with the untold stories of the forgotten dead. 7. Goldsworthy, Western Australia, the UN ghost town. Goldsworthy's story is unique in that it wasn't a gold rush town, but the site of Western Australia's first major iron ore mine. Established in the Pilbara in the 1960s, it was a thoroughly modern company town, built to a plan with 200 houses and a population of 700. It was a symbol of new Australian mining power. It was a functional, clean, and highly effective operation until the mine was closed in 1982. Goldsworthy's true horror story is its engineered erasure. The government had a deliberate policy to prevent ghost towns from emerging. As a result, when the town closed in 1992, every single building was removed, non-indigenous vegetation was burnt, and the roads were torn up. Very little remains to show the town ever existed, save for the flooded mine pit and the ghostly outline of the former street layout visible from the air. The terror here is not of a traditional phantom, but of absolute obliteration. The haunting is the uncanny sense of walking on a site where hundreds lived, loved, and worked, yet finding no trace of their existence. People who visit the desolate, remote area report a deep psychological unease, a feeling that they have stepped into a void where memory itself has been intentionally wiped clean. The chilling incident is the sudden, brief appearance of memory echoes, the faint smell of a barbecue on the dry air, a child's distant, fleeting laughter on a windless day, or a momentary, shimmering mirage of a suburban street where only red dirt and scrub exist. Goldsworthy is haunted by the absence of life, a terrifying monument to human impermanence, where the sheer nothingness is more chilling than any rattling chain. 8. Ophir, New South Wales, the Gold Fever Curse. Ophir holds a paramount place in Australian history. It was the site of the country's first payable gold discovery in 1851, sparking the Great Australian Gold Rush. The small village on the Summerhill Creek exploded overnight into a chaotic tent city of thousands. The rush was marked by immense wealth for a few, brutal hard labor for most, and rampant lawlessness. Though the initial alluvial gold was quickly exhausted, its discovery changed the course of the nation. The name itself, Ophir, comes from a biblical land famous for its gold. The sheer desperation and violence that saturated the ground at Ophir has left a dark, palpable residue. The gold was dug up quickly and violently, and many died for it, or went mad seeking it. The real haunted incident in Ophir is the experience known as the Gold Fever Ghost. Visitors to the historic site, particularly in the deeper, damper gullies where the best gold was found, have reported feeling an intense, sudden, irrational urge to dig, to scratch and claw at the dirt as if their life depended on finding a nugget. This frantic, manic energy is said to be the presence of the original miners who died destitute, whose obsession remains tethered to the creek beds. People sometimes claim to see the phantom gleam of a lantern swinging deep in the shadows of the old mine cuts, accompanied by the sound of a frantic pickaxe striking rock, a spectral miner forever chasing the wealth that eluded him in life. Ophir is not just a ghost town, it's a reservoir of desperate, manic ambition that can still possess the unwary visitor. 9. Kookynie, Western Australia, the Grand Hotel's permanent guest. Kookynie, in the Western Australian goldfields, boomed after gold was discovered in 1895. It rapidly grew into a substantial town with electric lighting, 7 brass bands, a hospital, a racecourse, and 7 hotels. The massive cosmopolitan proprietary mine was its beating heart. As the gold reserves dwindled in the early 1900s, Kookynie declined sharply, but unlike most ghost towns, it never fully died. It remains a living ghost town with a tiny, resilient population. Kookynie's haunting is famously centered around its enduring structure, the Grand Hotel Kookynie. This hotel is the main lifeblood of the town and allegedly the permanent residence of its most famous ghost. The Phantom of Kookynie is believed to be George, a former mine manager who lived at the hotel. The real haunted incidents are numerous and surprisingly domestic. George is reportedly a well-mannered, if mischievous, spirit. Hotel guests and the current owner, Margaret, have witnessed objects moving, doors opening and closing, and the sound of someone pacing in the empty hallways late at night. The most famous encounter involves the hotel bar. Bartenders and patrons have claimed to watch a shot glass or beer bottle gently slide an inch or two across the bar top when no one is near it, an old-fashioned call for service from a spectral guest who can no longer pay his tab. The friendly nature of George's haunting, the sound of an unseen billiard ball clicking, the gentle tap on the shoulder when no one is there, makes Kookynie unique, a ghost town that holds onto its memories so warmly, the dead still check in for a drink. 10. Mount Britton, Queensland, the Drought's vengeance. Mount Britton sprang to life in the rugged Queensland scrub after gold was discovered in 1881. The remote goldfield swiftly produced a full-fledged town, boasting 1,500 people, a school of the arts, a post office, and 6 licensed hotels. It was a boom town built on hope, but its prosperity was tragically short-lived. A combination of poor yields and severe, crippling drought rapidly drove the population away. By 1887, most businesses were closed, and by 1890, the town was officially defunct. The isolation and the desperate failure induced by the drought are the wellspring of Mount Britton's darker tales. The haunting is tied to the overwhelming sense of thirst and the punishing Queensland sun. The prevailing real encounter in the area is the eerie discovery of dry, scratch marks near the remnants of the old waterholes and dams, where no animal or human could have recently reached. This is attributed to the most tormented spirit of Mount Britton, a pioneer woman who, legend says, went mad from thirst and lost her child to the drought. Hikers and campers near the old town site, especially in the dry season, have reported hearing the faint, echoing sound of a baby crying accompanied by the sensation of sudden, unquenchable thirst, even when they have water with them. The temperature is said to inexplicably spike, and the air becomes thick and suffocating, mimicking the fatal conditions of the 1880s. The ghost of Mount Britton is the environmental cruelty itself, a spectral reminder that in the Australian outback, nature remains the most ruthless killer of all.